That was wonderful, Jeff. Thank you very, very much. I wanted your stirring words to giving the missionaries a bit of a hard time, but you concentrated rightly on the book, and you've beautifully elucidated the very title of the book, Rangatiratanga and Gentlemanship. And you've given us some depth and background to that. When Grant told me he was writing a book, I thought of the words of his father-in-law, Professor Sir Lloyd Gearing, Order of New Zealand, for whom I've done 7 books. The first of them was Ecclesiastes. Lloyd's own translation of Ecclesiastes says he did a new translation of Ecclesiastes. And of course it was Ecclesiastes, as you will all know, who says, "Of the making of books there is no end." I said, "Grant, must you? Must you do more books?" And now I've heard from Shane and I've heard from Jeff, and the answer is, well, all right. You're vindicated, my friend. So I'd like you to all welcome Grant Hodgson, the world's newest author.
Thank you very much for your kind words. It's very affirming. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. My greetings and thanks are to all of you here present, to those in our past, including those we have recently lost, and to those in our future. And I'm thinking of my grandchildren for whom I wrote this book. Now, some of you may remember an old musical called Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, there's a lovely line and a lovely song which goes, "I'd like to see a word for the farmers." Well, tonight, I'd like to say a word for the missionaries. All right. Because I've spent a good deal of the last few years burying myself in the records, the letters and journals of my missionary forebears. And there's a couple of points that I want to make about them that I've come to appreciate through this work. And the first one is that it's worth noting that these Church Missionary Society missionaries that came to Kirikiri and Paihia were part of a movement. And this movement successfully abolished slavery in 1807. And this was as a result of a principled, persistent political campaign that eventually required a pragmatic set of political and financial compromises. But they also managed to get it effectively enforced and policed by the Royal Navy, the most powerful military operation on the planet at that time. And you might note that in some ways this set a precedent for later fisheries and treaty settlement deals. That such social action, patiently applied, had the possibility of achieving worthwhile social aims. So then this strange group, some might say woke, some might say deranged, a very interesting group of individuals travelled as far as it was possible to travel to the other side of the world and settled here with their families, their children. And they set up house with the avowed aim of changing the culture that they encountered. They intended to change the culture. and to change it in fundamental ways that they perceived and that they tried to get agreement were for the better, is the argument I would make. The message of love, hope and peace that my book brings to the fore was not instantaneously accepted. And some of the unintended side effects proved to be fatal, both for their children and for the children of the Maori that they were dealing with and meeting. They were opposed, they were slandered, they were undermined by some of their own countrymen. Looking at you, Governor Gray. And they were regarded as meddling busybodies getting in the way of the inexorable growth of the economy and the greedy march of economic progress. But for all of that, the fact is that key elements of the ideology upon which they based their work have survived. Ideas embodied in the Lord's Prayer, and I was brought up an Anglican and never realised what the Lord's Prayer actually contained, which is really reference to many of the ultimate questions about where do we get our food from, our daily bread. But some of the other ones are the expectation that conditions on earth should be as they are in heaven. Some imagined heaven, this ideal, but we should try and make it happen here. The idea of loving one's enemies. Of treating all individuals with equal respect, of not being intimidated by threats or actual violence. And this has been nearly universally adopted in Aotearoa, New Zealand, as the standard for dispute resolution. And we now use lawyers instead of warriors. But the other point I wanted to make about missionaries is that they took active responsibility in the communities they settled in for providing the basic needs of food, shelter and health, building on existing farming methods, building houses, building schools, building churches, and administering what we would now call community health care. And today I believe that we need to continue to ensure that our common wealth is employed to make ownership of warm, dry houses, to make educational opportunities and the highest standards of health care a universal and not a restricted right. So as we walk backwards into the future, with our eyes focused on the past, seeking clues for how to steer ourselves into a possible age of sustainable abundance, it's worth studying and noting the accounts of our missionary forebears and to follow what they learned, the mistakes they made, whether they were aware of it or not, in the hope that we can avoid repeating errors. So it's sometimes held that the universe is a cold and meaningless world bereft of purpose, but I still hold that there is reason to be hopeful. Our educability is based on this growing body of knowledge. Daniel Dennett said that a scholar is a library's way of making another library. But our tested theories and our humane values are the basis for the growth. We've got a lot yet to build and develop, but we have a wealth of cultural foundations upon which to build. And though this process demands energy, scholarship, and forbearance to sustain, it nevertheless constitutes real progress. So te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi Marie, tato tato e. Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Being a politician, I have to fly.
Yeah, thank you very much for enabling me to come along. And I shall let the whānau know in Kaitaia that a part of our history lives on the pages of your book.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
Yeah, you're a far better speaker than Peter Hodgson. Thank you very much.